Good morning, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy and Passionate World Talk Radio. Jeanne White is the producer and writes the blog, which I highly suggest you read. I have a special guest with me today. I have a fellow New Jersey girl, got to help out my New Jersey gals. And it's kind of funny because I met my guest on LinkedIn and didn't realize that we travel in the same Facebook groups for dementia. And what's special about my guest is that Candace has a blog, and she wants to educate people about frontotemporal lobe dementia, which is one of the dementias that really doesn't get the focus. So I want to let you, the audience, know to stay tuned to this because this is going to be very informative. So welcome, Candance Williams. You are the blog writer for our FTD journey. Welcome.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on. Candace, can you tell about why you created your blog and why we'd like people to read it?
So the blog was born because maybe about a year or so after my mom got diagnosed, she said that she wanted to work on a project with me. And I really didn't have any ideas as to like what, and I asked her what she wanted to do, but she was already starting to have a hard time communicating. So, I just was throwing out ideas, and I was like, hey, why don't I make a bunch of pictures and videos and stuff, and put them up online and help educate people on what this disease is about. And she was like, okay, she was cool with that. So, and then so I just started, taking a lot more pictures and videos, and and started writing different things to put up there, and so was born our FTD journey.
Well, I'm glad you are writing about it. How old is your mom now, and how old was your mom when she was diagnosed?
So now she's 64. She was diagnosed when she was 57.
Wow, so you're 7 years into this journey.
Yep.
And what do you want people to know about what you are going through? I think it's really great that you're doing a blog. I wished I did, but I'm not a writer. I just would show pictures of my husband and videos. But what would you like people to know about your journey with your mom?
Because it's a tough one. It's one that, a lot of people do not get a lot of support. And it's not something that people talk about a lot, Like you hear about Alzheimer's all day, every day, but you don't hear about FTD. Like people just don't talk about unless they've been affected by it. People don't talk about it because nobody really knows about it.
That's true. I've had people on my show who loved ones did have frontotemporal lobe, and I think it's important to talk about it and bring awareness to it, which is why I'm so grateful that you are on to talk about it. Did you find it difficult to get a diagnosis for your mom?
So the diagnosis process took probably maybe 1.5 to 2 years.
Wow.
Well, she was misdiagnosed, which is very common with FTD. FTD is often misdiagnosed as a mental illness, like schizophrenia, a lot, bipolar. And my mom, throughout my life, was bipolar. So, at the time it kind of made sense. And her psychiatrist decided that she would, tweak her medicine and see if that helps. And it didn't help. And so her psychiatrist thought, well, let's, take her to the family doctor and, get her worked up because maybe there's something a little bit more serious going on here. The problem is, one of the reasons it takes so long to get a diagnosis is because most people who are diagnosed with this are young. They're 50s, they're 40s, sometimes they're 30s, and I've even heard as young as 20. So nobody wants to believe that anybody in their 20s, 30s, 40s can get dementia. I certainly didn't want to believe that.
Very true.
So we got directed to her primary physician, and he did like a whole metabolic panel on her. He wanted to check her if she was deficient in vitamins such as B12, because there are conditions out there that mimic dementia, but once you fix them, you go back to what they call baseline.
Right.
So they checked her for B12 deficiency and other vitamin deficiencies, and blood work. They checked her thyroid because she has a thyroid condition, and if your thyroid's out of whack, that can cause memory issues and erratic behavior and stuff like that. So they want to make sure that was functioning, although she doesn't have a thyroid or a parathyroid anymore. So they wanted to check her levels to make sure her medication levels were okay. That checked out. So all the blood work and metabolic tests and everything, all that stuff all came out okay. So, but, she still was not herself. So he said, well, I'm going to refer you to a neurologist at UPenn, or PenMed. I think it was PenMed. So she take her to the neurologist, and then now he wants to do cognitive testing, to draw a clock, count money, do this, do that, everything,
Right.
And then he saw, okay, there's a problem here, because she couldn't even, count money anymore. She couldn't, I'm not sure what the clock test was like, but she scored low on much of her testing. So then he said, okay, well, let's get her in for a PET scan. And that's where we got the diagnosis, with the PET scan.
Wow, that's really important for people to hear, Candace. Now, you were lucky that your primary doctor knew, to recommend you to a neurologist. Did you yourself have instinct, there's got to be something more here than going on than a bipolar or possible schizophrenia? Did you have that instinct that something's not right?
Yeah, well, I thought it was her bipolar. I mean, I certainly had fleeting moments where I said to myself, oh, my gosh, my mom has Alzheimer's. But then I was like, nah, my mom's too young for that. No way. She started showing symptoms about 7 years before she actually got diagnosed. So I saw a lot of changes in her, like with her behavior and stuff. And I honestly thought it was her bipolar more than dementia, because I'm familiar with bipolar, and for some reason the early stages of FTD for her mimicked her bipolar. In fact, it almost made me walk away from our relationship, because I was like, I just thought she just was not taking her medicine and was being a toxic individual. But then there was also something in my mind that said, there's something maybe a little bit deeper here. So, at first bipolar seemed to fit the bill, but even I had to admit at some point that it was a lot more than that.
You bring out a lot of good points, Candace, because a lot of times, well, most of the time, I believe that symptoms start years before sometimes with an individual, and a family member, I know I did it myself with my husband, think, oh, they're being, not cooperative, or they're being mean, when it's actually the disease. And I like that you brought up that, FTD can mimic other mental health issues. And it's so important to get the proper diagnosis. And I really hope that somehow neurologists or scientists, whoever, can get to a point where they could get a diagnosis properly without wasting 2 years. And you're not the first person to tell me that, it took that long. And I love that you are on LinkedIn, and that's how I noticed your blog, and that you talk about your journey and you show pictures of your mom. I admire you for that. I really love that, because I think that's very important. Let's put the face to the name of this disease. And also, you're right. Nobody thinks of anyone getting dementia in their 20s, 30s, 40s. My husband was diagnosed at 56. I didn't even know you could get Alzheimer's in your 50s. I had no idea 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and neither did the doctors at that time. But it's important, and I'm glad you're raising awareness, Candace, that it is not an old person's disease. People, please listen to this. It can happen at any age. If you suspect something, go to your doctor. And
well, here's the scary. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that what the scary thing is that, before symptoms even show, you can actually have dementia lurking in your brain for 20, 30 years before symptoms show up.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and FTD is really hard to pin down, not just because of the fact that people are so young when they get it, but because there's so many people go through so many behavioral changes. Like, it often gets misdiagnosed as, like I said, mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia. Depending on the age of the person, a doctor might say, oh, he's just going through a midlife crisis. Sometimes people are upstanding citizens all their lives. All of a sudden now they're going to stores and shoplifting, or walking down the street nude and flashing people, or, approaching kids when they've never done anything like that in their life before. But they have FTD going on in their brain. All of a sudden they're acting out in odd ways. So, families break up because of this disease, because it's hard to know, is my spouse or parent or whoever having some kind of crisis, some kind of breakdown, or are they actually sick? There's a lot of people undiagnosed even sitting in jail, because they got involved in criminal behavior and they have FTD and nobody knew,
That's a very good point, Candace, because the FTD affects your frontal lobe, and which affects your behavior, and you hear people, even getting violent, doing, like you mentioned, things they never would have done before, and then you wonder, well, what's going on? And it's important when you have a loved one who is exhibiting those odd, unusual behaviors to get checked, even go to more than one doctor if you have to get different opinions. It's very, very important to do that.
Yeah.
How did you? Yes. How did you react to that when you found out that your mom knows that?
So first I was like, oh my God, what's frontotemporal dementia? Because I had never heard of it. And then I just went into complete breakdown mode for like 3 months. I just cried for like 3 months straight. Because finally it made sense. Okay, my mom is sick. And then it was like, oh my God, my mom is sick. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
No, it does. Yeah, no, it does. It sure does. It's devastating. It's very devastating. And no matter what dementia your loved one has, it's devastating, and that's an understatement, folks. And you don't know that until you live it. When you live it,
rips up your life.
Yes. And now, what was your mom's reaction? Did she understand what was going on?
Yeah, she understood for a little while. Obviously, she was upset. I mean, you know, she got a glimpse into her future, and when she got that diagnosis, you know, she was definitely depressed. You know, nobody wants to go out like that.
Right.
You know, and which brings me to another point. Aside from the fact that there's a lot of people sitting in jail with FTD, there's also a lot of people that commit suicide. Now, I don't have the figures and numbers on that, but it's not uncommon for people to find out they have FTD and kill themselves because, you know, maybe they have seen the future of somebody else who has suffered it or Alzheimer's or some other dementia, and they decide, that's just not the way I want to live.
That's true. People do decide that. I mean, I'm in a lot of dementia support groups, Candace, just like you are, and I know people who have said they will definitely take themselves out if they get diagnosed with any kind of dementia.
Mm-hmm.
I understand, and I can understand that 100%. I can understand that. Me personally, I don't know if I could do that, but I understand why they would.
Well, I've heard stories. I've heard stories of people that get a diagnosis and then they just go shoot themselves in the head or overdose on something. You know, I mean, it's a horrendous disease. If you've lived through it, if you watch somebody suffer from it, you know, there's a part of you that doesn't question why they did it. I mean, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that, you know, there's a part of you that kind of understands, you know.
Exactly.
You know, it's like part of you is like, well, why wouldn't they just want to live out their life? But then when you look at somebody, I mean, I'm looking at my mom, 7 years in post-diagnosis, because remember, she had it at least 7 years, so really we've been at this 14 years.
Wow.
Because, you know, people always ask, well, how long has your mom had FTD? Well, that depends. Do you mean pre-diagnosis or post-diagnosis? You know what I'm saying? You know,
right, exactly.
The figures for the span of life are post-diagnosis numbers. They never factor in how long the person may have had it before they were diagnosed.
So, Candace, that's so true.
You know, and so I always try to make that distinction
mm-hmm.
with people, you know.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's true. You know, my husband he was diagnosed 10 years ago, but I want to say, looking back at hindsight, he had to have it at least 2 years prior to diagnosis when I look back. And, you know, hindsight's always 20/20, and you don't think of things sometimes.
Right.
How is your mom doing now? Do you have help?
So since COVID, we don't have anybody coming in. So,
oh, yeah.
But, you know, my mom is pretty laid back now. Mom and I went through a few rough years here through her dementia, but she's very laid back now. So she sits a lot during the day. She naps a lot during the day. She's lost a ton of weight. I mean, you know, every day that you're watching somebody go through this, you're literally watching them lose themselves, like, every day. Like, you know, this is not a steady course. It's fluid.
That's
Things
true.
are constantly changing. You can't get comfortable because as soon as you get comfortable, there's another change. You know, my concern these days is when she's going to decide to stop eating because she's lost so much weight. And she's not in stage. I mean, she's late stage, Well, I don't know how close she is to end stage, but I mean that, you know, even though I've been at this for 7 years, I do enjoy taking care of her, as difficult as it is. And you know, I don't think there's any part of you that's ever ready to lose somebody, no matter what it is, unless they're absolutely suffering. And she's not suffering. I mean, she still laughs and she still has appropriate responses to some things. You know, like if there's something funny on TV, she'll laugh. If there's something sad on TV, like some commercials we can't even let her look at because she'll cry. Like, you know how they show like the commercials like with the homeless dogs and stuff.
Oh,
like,
yes.
She can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She, you know, she still interacts. She doesn't speak well. She speaks maybe 4 or 5 words at once at most. She's, like I said, she's super skinny now. But she's healthy, body-wise, mind-wise, not body-wise. She's still healthy. And here's something, a little tip that people don't know that I didn't even know until last year, that my mother developed a vagus nerve issue. And apparently it's very common for people with neurological disease. So what happens is my mom has naturally low blood pressure. So, but now pooping is quite the event at the house, because anytime she's trying to strain to poop even just a little bit, she'll pass out.
Wow.
Yeah. So
well, you just taught me something. You just taught me something, Candace. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, it's called vasovagal near syncope. And what it is the way the emergency room doctor explained it the first time I took her for it, the only time I took her for it, because now I know what it is, so now I know what to look out for, find the symptoms. So according to the emergency room doctor, he said the vagus nerve controls pee, poop, and vomit. Pee, poop, vomit. And what happens is your blood pressure drops, and then you pass out. And then, but you do come to eventually, unless your blood pressure continues to drop. But usually your blood pressure will naturally come up on its own. But what happens, like the first time it happened, it was scary because my mom was sitting on the toilet, and her aide was here, and she called me freaking out, and she's like, your mom, something's wrong with your mom. Your mom's unresponsive. And when I went in there, she was slumped forward on the toilet, and her face was cold, like her whole body was cold, like I thought she was gone. And you know, and then she started throwing up. And then we called the ambulance, and they came, and they said, oh, this looks like a vagus nerve issue, and you know, we took her to the hospital, and that's what it was. But you know, there's a lot of stuff people don't tell you when it comes to dementia. The vagus nerve issue, I swear, it's awful. It's so scary because it looks like they're dead when they're not, but they're not breathing properly because their blood pressure just drops, and you know, it's tough. It's really tough. Up until that point, we really didn't have any like major issues, but the vagus nerve issue has added a extra safety issue because she can pass out anytime, any place.
Well, so, and you know what? That's really interesting, and this is how caregivers learn from each other. This is why it's very important to have a support group in person or you know on Facebook, because this is where you learn, and this is why I have my show, is to help others to learn. Now, I learned something from you today, Candace, that I can pass on, because I have heard of people passing out. A lady just said yesterday that her husband had passed out. Maybe that was his problem.
It's not uncommon. You wouldn't know that because, you know, so few people talk about it. But if you do the research, you'll realize that people with neurocognitive disorders, it's not uncommon for them to have that kind of issue. And I'm not sure what the connection is and why, but yeah.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. That's very important to know, and to that happens, and people hear this podcast, they can ask the doctor if that's the reason. So thank you for that information. And you're right, Candace. I say this all the time. You said it's not fluid. Any dementia, it doesn't run a straight course. It just doesn't, folks. We know what the end result is. The end result, unfortunately, is dying. What happens between time of diagnosis and the end, nobody knows. Everyone is individual, and it baffles doctors. So, if it baffles doctors, it certainly baffles us, because they don't know why some people progress quicker, slower. And you're right, Candace. Nobody is really prepared for the end. I can say that from my own experience, even though you try to prepare yourself and that, it's for the best for the individual, it's hard to say goodbye. I said to Matt, I'll see you later. It's really difficult. And, end of life is different for everybody. Did you discuss with your mom her end of life wishes? What she would like, not like?
She has she's a DNR, do not resuscitate. So she doesn't want any, tubes and heroic measures or anything like that. So, unfortunately, like when she takes her last breath, that's that. So, I wish I could have another. My mom was young when she had me. Like, we grew up together. So she was 19 when she had me. And she was diagnosed. I was only 38 myself.
Wow.
So it's kind of weird thinking that, like, we won't finish out our lives together. You know what I mean? Because she was so young.
Right. Yes. And the younger the person, the parent that's diagnosed, is the child, the adult child, can be anywhere from a young child to an adult child, and it's still difficult, even if you're 38 years old, even if you're 20. My son was 24, 25 when his dad was diagnosed. But prior to that, we lived with my mother-in-law, who also had Alzheimer's. So Josh kind of from teen years, but this is the situation, Candace, that people are going to be facing. And are the younger kids going to put their life on hold? Are they not going to go to college, stay home, take care of a parent? Young people have gotten a taste of this now during the COVID, if their parents were sick. It's just going to be, what they call the silver tsunami, as more and more people are aging and getting some kind of dementia.
Yeah, my mom's a baby boomer.
Yes, so am I. Yes. Before COVID happened, did you had help?
Yeah, we had aid and we had housekeepers, and but once COVID hit, we called all that off because I'm high risk. My mom obviously is high risk. She cannot afford to get COVID. I've been lucky so far, knock on wood, that she hasn't even gotten a cold since she got her diagnosis. So I can't risk anybody coming in the house, masked or unmasked, really, to help with her, because neither of us can afford that.
That's true.
Obviously,
yes.
If you're masked, you're better off, but it's better really. The only people who come around are, it's mainly my grandmother comes to see her.
Wow.
So outside of that, there's not too many other people that come in and out the house. Like, so we are really pretty isolated, but honestly, I don't know the difference because I was isolated before COVID. So.
Yes, and that's, I'm glad you, in a way, said that, Candace, because I have been saying ever since I started doing videos in my car 3 years ago, that caregivers have faced social isolation way before this pandemic and will continue to face isolation after this pandemic if it ever goes away. So the world got a little taste of what we have gone through.
And they're complaining. They don't like it. And it's funny to me because I'm like, we have this down to a science. You know? Yeah. This is easy for us. I mean, we're used to this, you know, people, because also when you get the diagnosis, you lose your friends, you lose your family. Like, nobody wants to come around because, you know, my mom's so-called best friend stopped coming around because she said she can't communicate with her anymore. And, you know, that really bugs me because there's so many different ways to communicate with somebody. You don't have to use words. Most of our communication is like 80% nonverbal. You know, we use our hands when we talk. We use our eyes. You know, we use our senses. So you don't have to use language to communicate with people. And I think that's such a cop-out, and that makes me so angry that people think it's okay to walk away from somebody just because you can't have a conversation with them anymore. Well, you know what? So when my mom's friend walked away from her, she didn't just walk away from her, she walked away from me, because that means that's another person that I don't get support from.
That's right. And
people don't think about this when they're just, you know, up and walking away. They, you know, people will say, oh, well, it's just hard. It's just hard to be around. Well, you know, I'm around it 24/7. How do you think I feel?
Yes, preach it, Candace. Yes, I like when other people say what I say because it's true. You know, listen to this, folks. It's true.
Every day I'm watching my mom lose functionality of herself, lose functionality of her brain. And my mom has to be fed now. She can't even feed herself anymore. I have to be cautious when she's walking around the house because she'll decide she wants to sit on a chair and end up sitting on the floor. My mom is in diapers now, 24/7. My mom has now, I can't let her walk around the house by herself anymore because now she's got this biggest nerve issue. So if she falls and hits her head, then that's a whole other issue. I mean, people just, I don't know. I think
they don't get it.
No,
they don't get it, Candace.
I mean, it's hard for them, but it's hard for me because not only has she lost herself, but she lost who I am in her life. Like, she knows I'm there. She appreciates that I'm there. Oddly enough, she's still very appreciative. She still says thank you for things, and you know, and she can still say that she loves me and everything, and that's all wonderful. I love that. At the same time, I can't have the same interaction with her that I did before her diagnosis. Like, I miss having a conversation with my mom, like a real conversation. I miss being able to say, you know, just pick it out, say any news story and say, man, you believe that, you know, or whatever. You know, I don't have the same kind of interaction with her anymore. My interaction, even with people anymore, is just really not there anymore. You know, I'm not really like what you would call a lonely person. I'm an introvert. So the fact that I'm even like doing this blog and, you know, having these podcast appearances and stuff is completely out of my comfort zone. But it was important enough to me to get the message out about this dementia than it is to have my privacy. I mean, I still keep myself private as much as I can, being a public figure, I guess. But you know, I mean, like, people really need to understand just what we go through. And I think, though, you really can't understand unless you go through it. But I get so sick of people copping out and saying, you know, with their excuses. It's hard. I can't communicate. You know, I don't understand. Or, well, guess what? I don't understand my mom either. But I still try.
Yes. And then the famous one, Candace. Well, they don't know who I am, so why bother? I just want to smack them. I just don't like smacking people. I didn't. I want to make that clear.
Yeah, why does it matter that she doesn't know who you are? You know who she is.
That's right. That's right. So true. My son, who has cognitive disabilities, you know, they say out of the mouth of babes, he told someone in church, you know, all you have to do is call up my dad and say, hi, brother so-and-so, how are you, Matt? And my son said to this guy, it's not rocket science.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, my son understood Alzheimer's better than so-called intelligent people. But you're right, people do not understand until they walk in our shoes. And, you know, I feel like I've been banging as a drum, and I feel like I'm John the Baptist crying out in the wilderness and no one's listening. But you know what? The world is starting to listen slowly. They're getting the social isolation. And I think it's great that they have public service announcements about mental health now. Where was it for the caregivers? Nobody cared about our mental health. But now they're saying, oh, you know, being isolated causes depression, suicide. Yes, it does, and it's not a laughing matter. And the suicide rate and the mortality rate with caregivers is at an all-time high. So we've been addressing these problems, and I say we because I still consider myself a caregiver. I have a caregiver's heart. Well, actually, I still am a caregiver to my son, but not to anyone who has dementia anymore. But I have a caregiver's heart that will always be there. And I'm there with you, Candace. I'm actually a shy person. Nobody believes that. But when it came to raising awareness and early onset Alzheimer's, I had to do it. You know, you just put aside your insecurities to raise awareness on dementia that is important in your life, that has changed your life. And I thank you.
Here's the thing.
Excuse me.
That I can't seem to get people to understand. We need support, especially those of us that are dealing with early onset, because there is like almost nothing out there for us. I couldn't, even before COVID, I could not find any support groups. Now all of a sudden they're popping up online, which is nice, and I appreciate, you know, being able to go on Zoom and have support groups and stuff like that. But, you know, every once in a while, my introvert self says, you know, maybe you should get out for 5 minutes, you know. But, you know, there's nothing. And then, okay, so you don't have any support from the medical industry. You get the diagnosis, and doctor says what? Get your affairs in order. Good luck.
Yeah, that's right.
Then your friends walk away from you. Then your family walks away from you. But I got to tell you, my mom's so-called best friend that walked away from her now has a sibling of her own that has early onset dementia, FTD.
Wow. So now she's gonna. Wow.
Now she's reaping what she sowed, and I have completely just eliminated her from life because she contacted me a couple of years ago after I hadn't heard from her for 2-3 years and said, "Oh, I've been worried about your mom," you know. And I started saying to people, "Well, if you want to know how she is, come see her."
Yes.
But no, you know. They say, "How's your mom?" I just got to a point. I say, "Oh, she's fine, thanks." Because I got tired of begging people to come visit her because eventually everybody just thought she lost 100% of her friends, and I think it's disgusting.
That's so sad.
And then a lot of people say, "Oh, you're so angry, but you'll get past it one day." Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I think people need to understand that. You know, that it's just disgusting to up and leave people like that just because you have an issue. I think people are inherently selfish. I think, they see how they feel, but they don't see how the person on the other side feels. Because my mom's best friend could have easily said to me, I'm here to support you. And it could have been there for me. But no, she didn't want to do that. So now she's going through it, and I'm like, you know what? I don't feel obligated here to help her out, and I can certainly help her out because I obviously have a lot of information, but I don't feel obligated. My obligation, my responsibility now is my mother, and getting the word out about FTD and what she passes, whenever that is. My job is to continue my work.
Yes. I agree with you, Candace, like 1,000%, because I know it hurts. It hurt me. It's hurtful, folks. It's hurtful when your friends and your family and your place of worship turn their back on you. It's painful, folks. It's hard to get over. Don't tell us to get over it because It's hard. My husband was at our church work day every time. Every time there was a work day. I called up to ask for help. I didn't even get an answer. They turned their back on that. Now, Matt, of course, didn't care, but I cared. It hurt me that I couldn't get anyone to mow the lawn. I wasn't even going to pay them and to shovel snow, and nobody would help Matt.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you would think that people would be more willing to, call you up and say, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? Can I bring you something? Can I sit with your mom for a half hour while you go to the bank or to the store or whatever? No.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
You don't know there's a saying, you don't know who your true friends are until you, actually need them.
Mm-hmm.
Until you find yourself in a situation like when you're actually sick or whatever the situation may be. And I have to tell you, I have found that to be quite true, unfortunately.
Oh, very true. Very true. I heard a pastor say, if you really want to know what someone is like, shake them up when there's a crisis and see what comes out. And that's very true. What comes out in your friends at a time of a crisis, if you need somebody, if they have a crisis. It's so true. Candace, I could talk to you for hours.
And I think that's part of why also I'm doing the blog, because I don't want other people to feel like they have to go through this completely by themselves. I mean, I can't be there physically to hold everybody's hand, but at least if I have something out there, people will see, okay, we're not really alone. There are other people going through this, and and I hope my blog offers to be not just educational, but a place of support.
Yes, I like your blog very much, and I'm glad I came across your blog, and I'm glad I came across you, Candace, and I want to thank you for coming on Chatting with Betsy. Can you please tell the audience, it will be in the blog, but that my station manager, Jeanne White, writes, can you tell people how they can get in touch with your blog to read it?
So my blog, or actually I like to say our blog because really it is our blog, is our FTDjourney.com. Okay.
And information will be in the blog Jeanne White writes, so you can read Candace's our FTD Journey blog, which I highly suggest you read. I don't have anyone in my family with FTD. I read it. I just find it very informative. I want to learn about FTD. There's not enough awareness on FTD, and this is why I do my show, is to bring awareness on different topics out to the listeners because it is important. And, I don't care if people are uncomfortable with what I talk about because we have to talk about topics, and whether they're uncomfortable or not. So thank you so much, Candace.
I'm out here to make people comfortable. I'm out here to teach people. If they don't like it, they don't have to read it.
That's how I feel. That's exactly how I feel. Thank you so much, Candace. You're so passionate. I just love that you are passionate what you're doing. I totally relate to you on so many levels, because even though the dementias are different, the caregiver realities are not different. It doesn't matter what dementia you have, your loved one has. The caregivers feel the same across the board and international. The loneliness, the isolation, and many more feelings that caregivers do feel. And I am an advocate for caregivers, and I will speak up for the caregiver because that is what I do. And thank you again, Candace, for coming on Chatting with Betsy. Folks, you don't have to be alone. If you are going through a journey yourself or your loved one, I have a group on Facebook. All dementias are welcomed. It's called #Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement. But I welcome all dementias, and I, encourage you to join. Chatting with Betsy, if you missed any of this podcast, is now heard on Amazon Music, Apple, Google, and where you hear podcasts, you will hear Chatting with Betsy. And it is free to subscribe. I just love having all my guests on that make up Chatting with Betsy. And thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. In a world where you could be anything, folks, be kind. Next month, November, is Caregivers Month. And you better believe I'm going to be posting on my own personal page about caregivers. We need to honor caregivers. If you know a caregiver, please do something to honor them. It doesn't have to be anything expensive. How about a phone call? How about a text? That's just that easy, folks. Reach out to a caregiver. Let them know that you are there for them. It's so important. And I don't wish anyone to have walked in my shoes or anyone else's shoes that has any kind of dementia, but you don't know what it's like until you live it. So have some compassion for a caregiver. And I'll never stop saying that. I want to thank Jeanne White, station manager, and Lynn Caldwell, CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, that gives people the opportunity to talk and to have a podcast to help others. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy and Passionate World Talk Radio. Till we chat again, be blessed. Bye-bye, everybody.